Great. Thanks very much. Very excited to be here with Amit. As a short introduction of Amit, spent originally about 8 years in the hotel space, and then moved on to Make My Trip, where I think you were there for about 9 years. And then obviously in 2014, saw an opportunity, a gap in the market. You were living in Singapore at the time, and 2015 founded RedDoorz. I think at Jungle, we've been very fortunate to be an investor in RedDoorz since March of 2015. So they're at the very, very early days, and have been able to watch your evolution over the last 5.5 years. I think, over that time, you've shown a great combination of both patience and aggression in what turned out to be a very competitive space. But we're always very thoughtful and focused. And this morning, I think we have an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's been happening over the last year. And since we can't travel, we can take a pandemic journey with RedDoorz. And maybe as a place to stop, as a first stop, why don't we go back to January of 2020 this year? Maybe you could start there. How is the business? You had just closed a pretty big round in August. What were you thinking about for this year going in?
Yeah. So thanks, David. Thanks for the kind words, and very good morning, everybody. Great to be here virtually in the conference. So coming back to the question, right? January was a very optimistic period, right? We were looking into the first full year. We had set up our budgets for 2020. Everything was hunky dory, right? And pretty much by that time we had realized that it's going to be a year where we will be driving towards profitability. We didn't want to go after the crazy growth phase of 2018 and 2019. So in our own mind, we had started thinking about rationalization cost, grow 2x rather than like 4x, and get the unit economics to some semblance of order, which had kind of gone, when we were in the super growth phase, right, then obviously the unit economics had gone a little haywire. So we were already in the verge of planning a very stable growth and moderated growth for 2020 when the pandemic happened.
Got it. But then you'd also expanded around the region last year. So how many countries were you in January?
Yeah, so 4 countries. There's obviously Singapore, where we headquartered, Indonesia, which is the largest market, the Philippines, and Vietnam. But we've also gone into Thailand, right? So Thailand was a growth market for 2020.
Right. And were you going to expand further, as you sat there, or were you in the markets that you kind of felt like you needed to be in?
Yeah, not for 2020. So what we would typically do, 6 months before a calendar year would end, right? We would start off our expansion plan. So 2020 was not there, but 2021 we would already start thinking to create a thesis around 2021.
Got it. And then obviously the first circuit breaker started in April. I think it was the 3rd in Singapore. The end of March, the U.S. stock market dropped, rebounded, and then dropped again in April. Borders were shut, flights were canceled, global travel stopped. Where were you kind of in that January to April period? Where was the leadership team? What were you doing? How were you thinking about the business?
Yeah. So, in Singapore and in the Philippines and even Vietnam, right, we started feeling the effects of the pandemic, and we started taking, kind of action towards changing our cost structures in those markets, right? So we already had an inkling or that things are going to go pretty south from there. I think we were a little naive, and I think a lot of people in Indonesia were also naive, right? We were thinking that there's going to be no pandemic in Indonesia because till March, right, the newspaper reports and the numbers were like in Indonesia were negligible. So we were thinking, hey, there's going to be nothing there, so it's going to be a passing phase, right? I think the reality of the situation really hit us on the 15th of March when Indonesia started to kind of slow down and kind of clamp up, right, in a way. I think by that time we had a great idea that this is going to be a long haul kind of situation. and we need to start reacting even further or even more quickly than we had in the past. So yes, we were in crisis mode, say 15th of March onwards, even before the first lockdown was announced in Singapore.
Yeah. And you obviously joined a lot of our founder sessions that we were having during that period. I know, the broad advice that we were giving to a lot of the founders was, if you need to cut, cut once, cut as deep as you possibly can. Hopefully not to the bone, but try and only do it once, and then make sure that those employees that remained and the partners that you had a higher level of confidence that there was kind of a path and a way through this. How did you think about, reducing opex, saving some of that capital? And I think you were very fortunate to have raised, when you did last year, but, still, I was impressed by some of the moves that you made, and it would be great to maybe to share some of those.
Yeah, sure. So we obviously took your advice on board, but just the way that our business is structured, we had to reduce opex in phases, right? So we did the easy stuff first, like we closed down Thailand. We had a few, reduction in staff in Vietnam and so on and so forth. But it was not really possible for us to do that cut once, cut deep kind of advice we implemented completely. Simply because geographically we were different. The pandemic hit us at different times. And I think the other important thing was that we were not too pessimistic about the way the situation is going to turn out, right? I mean, the last thing I wanted was a company which is bare bone when things are starting looking better, like they're looking now, right? You know how difficult it is to build a company. And while everybody was panicking and and literally throwing in the towel, we made measured kind of cuts, right? So one thing which we wanted to avoid was to give an across the board salary cut. So we rather let go of people and then have a few people who are like fully motivated. But unfortunately, as the pandemic progressed, and the usual stuff which we did was did senior management pay cuts and other obvious things. The books were still not balancing, right? So we had to give a across the board pay cut. But the way we did it was that we gave the team a very transparent view of the situation, told them this is the pay cut we need to do. We're going to keep it from then, which is I think March, April, whenever, till December. But however, if there were certain milestones which we would achieve, and the pandemic situation would start looking better, we would start reversing those pay cuts. And I'm very happy to say that in the month of July, and in the month of August, we kind of reversed all those pay cuts because the team came together as one single unit and started performing at a different level altogether. So those are some of the things which we managed to do. And finally, when we did balance the books right, we started thinking about recovery, pole position. What does RedDoorz mean to us for the next 3-4 years? What's the future? And so we didn't really take your advice fully, David, but we took it.
No, it's I think you did an amazing job, and I think that level of transparency is one of the things that kept motivations so high, and a great culture in the business throughout the entire last couple of months. The other challenge that I think your business faces is that it has multiple stakeholders. So on one side you have consumers, but then on the other side you also have property owners, and both were being impacted in different ways. And so, how did you think about managing both sides of that equation?
So I think the consumer side was fairly simple, right? Because we're a domestic business which has got fairly last minute kind of reservations happening. We don't have the typical Airbnb or many other OTA kind of situation where you've taken customer advances and you have to handle those advances, etc. I mean, we did a reasonably good job there. In fact, very smoothly. Our customer NPS actually went up during the pandemic, right? I think the more tricky one was obviously the hotel owners or the hotel partners, right? And the way we've been looking at them from the beginning is that they are partners in the first place. So when things are going good for everybody, we put in a lot into the relationship. And so when things started not looking good, and we had to like renegotiate pretty much all our contracts with all the property owners, they were extremely cooperative. They kind of figured out like we had their best interest at heart, but at the same time, if there's no red doors left, there's no business for them either, right? So I think that was a very well executed renegotiation process, which was done by the team, and the partners were phenomenally supportive.
But you also help some property owners do renovations, improve their properties, make best use of the downtime.
Yes, we did, and also and help them in various other ways possible, right? Apart from just financial support or renovation support, but also started looking at giving their people counseling services through our Hope helpline, where their staff would call up our Hope helpline, and counselors would help them, understand their problems with the pandemic. And we tried our very best in various ways possible, including kind of over communicating with them, everything which we were trying to do. Similar to our employees, we communicated pretty well with our property owners.
Yeah, and then obviously as the business starts to come back, you've launched the Hygiene Pass. I think that's helping a lot from a trust and confidence perspective. Yeah,
I think Hygiene Pass is now almost is going to be like a given, right? It's going to be like a seal, safety seal, or a mark of quality. So not having Hygiene Pass would be a disadvantage, and that's again something which we did very quickly, certified it with an independent authority from Indonesia, and I think executed very, very well.
Yeah. And then as we kind of move forward into today and maybe even looking beyond, you've obviously launched some multiple brands over the last few weeks. Is that an opportunity because of the pandemic, or was that something that was planned, or it really takes you into new segments, I think?
Yeah. No, I think it's an opportunity from the pandemic, right? It made us realize who we are as a company, the whole pandemic, the whole crisis, and the way we started thinking about the business, thinking about our future. I mean, there was like a sea change, and I have no shame in admitting that prior to the pandemic, we were like a typical, growth-oriented, reasonably well-funded company, which was like looking after growth, and honestly, growth was being rewarded, right? So we had no choice. But I think post-pandemic, it's really allowed us to give a lot of thought on who we really are. And who we really are is a company who believes that we need to make money. That's our primary objective. We just need to do it smartly by saving a lot of costs, and also reach out to new segments which allow us to make money. So when property owners saw that the RedDoorz, when other property owners saw that the RedDoorz property owners had the much higher occupancy, between 15 and 25% higher than non-RedDoorz property owners, they started reaching out to us and asking us whether we could help them. And we did realize at that moment that we had certain brand which could not, RedDoorz brand as a brand could not help different kind of properties, right? So it was more as a response from incoming inquiries from other property owners, and also the fact that there's going to be a resurgence of travel post-pandemic, and by that time we need to be able to cater to all levels of budget travel and all segments of budget travel, not the narrow 1.5 to 2 star RedDoorz properties which we currently have.
Yep, got it. And now we're in November. Our pandemic journey has taken us full circle. If you had to gaze into a crystal ball, what are you thinking about over the next 6 or 12 months? Is there light at the end of the tunnel for travel and accommodations?
Absolutely. Domestic travel is going to kick off, right? It already has. If you look at China, if you look at Korea, domestic travel is like pretty much up there. And even in pandemic countries like the United States, we can travel. I mean, the whole Airbnb story itself is resilient and strong because people want to travel, and they might decide to travel to different destinations, but travel domestically is already looking better. My my prediction is that domestic budget travel should be at about pre-pandemic levels around mid of 2021. The typical Marriott, Hilton, Singapore Airlines business class travel, which allows you to travel across countries, etc., might take much longer to recover. But this domestic travel, which is essential, is already underway.
Yeah, and I assume that advancements in testing are only going to help accelerate some of the international travel that's coming back into the regions.
Yeah, I think things are just going to be so much easier, right? I mean, I did read that or saw a video that in Dubai people are using sniffer dogs to sniff out COVID cases, and then there's a tube in Singapore which has got developed. You can just breathe in, and so it's just going to get so much easier, right, to travel than it is right now.
Yep. And, obviously, just in the couple of minutes that we have left, any tangible takeaways that maybe you can share with some of the founders that are watching? You've obviously been through a very turbulent year. You've made some tough decisions, starting to see light at the end of the tunnel now. Have you had a chance to kind of reflect back on the
year? I think, David, a couple of things, right, which I feel we did correctly. One was that we listened to everybody, but we did what we thought was the best course of action in our circumstances. If we would have listened to every piece of bad news which was being forwarded to us by a whole lot of well-meaning friends, investors, and so on, I mean, we would have reacted very differently. So I think that's one thing, right, which we did right, which we did well. I think the second thing which I wanted to kind of also mention is that it's very important to move very quickly and start taking those decisions quickly. And not taking a decision is not an option, right? Even if it's a wrong decision, and I'm sure we've done a bunch of stuff which could have been done better in hindsight. But it's important to take the decision quickly and also keep the team completely informed transparently. Right? So that just gives us a lot less to think about, because there's no intrigue and subterfuge from our side as when we are communicating to our team members. We just tell them the way it is, and then the folks who stay behind and choose to stay behind and fight it out are then with us for the long term. And there's some folks who want to leave us, or we've had to make them go. Well, we are sorry about that, but we should move on. So move quickly and just follow your own gut. I think is most critical in a situation like this.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the communication aspect, because I think it's the great communication that you had is the thing that kept that motivation high in the team. It, talked to the property owners and maintained, a level of confidence and trust with them. And so I think you did a great job on communication throughout the whole thing, particularly as we all went to a virtual environment.
Yeah. That unfortunately is not going away so quickly. The whole Zoom. I realized, David, I don't have 9 hours of work to sit in front of a computer and do. I need to go and meet people, and there are no people to meet. And so, I'm getting used to it.
Yeah, I think we all are. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I'm sure everyone pulled a lot out of the pandemic journey that you've been on. I think your space is obviously one of the ones that were impacted the most, and it's great to see that you've done so well, and that there are great businesses in the travel and accommodation space which will come out of this much stronger for the future.
Yeah, David, thanks. It was lovely talking to you. We certainly at least know where we want to be 2-3 years from now, and we've been working hard at it. And let's see, and time will tell how things turn out eventually. But so far, so good.
That's great. All right. Well, I think we'll pass it back to the host.